Hey guys, welcome back to the DIY Knife and Gun Workshop. I'm Alex Wetzel and I'll be your host on this video. If you've been following us, we're helping guys learn how to build their very own workbench for holster and sheath making. And on our last video, we went through and added all the tools that you'll be using to your bench. But there's one last step that I'm going to highly recommend that you consider before you call it a day on building out your bench. And that is, consider adding a piece of cutting board to your top surface in your workspace to eliminate the ugliness and the mistakes that I've made and others have made in getting right down to scoring your Kydex material on top of your fresh workbench surface, only to find that you're just cutting the living daylights out of it and making it basically unusable over time. What you don't realize, it's okay to score across your workbench surface and a line or two isn't going to bother you. But once you get enough lines, and hey guys, bring that video in with the old workbench. That's my old holster making workbench, and that show you right there what can happen to your workbench surface if you use it improperly and cut directly on the top. You'll get those grooves that are made by your scoring knife, and eventually you can't cut a straight line because every time you break through your material, it wants to grab one of those channels and run with it. So it makes more mistakes than it fixes. My recommendation is to come back to the cutting board surface. This is very inexpensive material. We sell it at both holstersmith.com and knifekits.com. And it's easy to install. You can easily replace it if you ever need it, and it actually ends up helping make the holsters because it provides you with a soft surface, softer than the grit that might get in top of your workbench surface to slide your Kydex sheet across and not scuff it up or scar it in the process of making your holsters. Not only that, but if you're working on knives and guns like we do, it's also softer than the material those are made out of, and it won't scratch them. So it's a good surface to work on. But we want to learn how to install this today, and this is based on experience. There are many ways to do this, many ways to set up your holster shop. I'm showing you our way, and this is based on making a few of these mistakes and trying to fix them with this particular new build. Anyway, what you want to do is you want to pick you a piece of cutting board material that is wider and longer than your standard piece of Kydex or leather that you work with. In our case, a 1 by 2 foot piece is about the average that we're going to be working with. Mostly we'll be cutting it down from there. If we have to cut a larger piece, then we'll make provision to run the 4-foot section off the bench. But for most of the processes that you're going to be doing, you're going to be working with smaller material. So pick a piece of cutting board that's larger than the actual base material that you're going to be working with, and you'll be a lot happier. In my case, I like to use a square to create my line for scoring, and I normally work from that side of the bench. So what that also does is that allows me to flush it up with the edge of my cutting board surface, and it makes creating the line a lot more easy to create on the fly. A lot of this is one-hand work, so you don't have time to jig it up and set it up. You want to make it as versatile as possible, and that tends to run a really nice straight line for me when I'm making mine. Okay? So what we want to do is make sure that when we put our cutting board surface down that we square it up, of course, but don't put it on the front edge of your bench where you're working from. My experience tells me and has shown me that the farther back you put it, the better off you are. Make sure it's not so close to your back wall that you can't get your square down it. Okay? I've even found that if you put about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of gap on the back of the bench to the actual cutting board surface, that gives you a nice place to stack your Kydex. When you finish cutting it, just stack it behind the cutting board, and it does a great job of holding it there while you're working. But what we want to do is we want to put this in place and show you how to mount it up real quick and easy. Make it nice so that if you ever have to replace it, that's also simple. And don't forget, if you just want a new fresh surface, all you got to do is pick it up and flip it over, and you got a clean surface on the other side. Some guys only cut on one side of their cutting board, and they flip it over if they're working on another type of project. Okay, so let's get started. Let me show you what we're going to use today. We've got a standard screw gun, we've got a drill, safety glasses, obviously our square and our scoring knife. We'll be using a drill that is the same diameter as the size of the head on your actual screw. I'm going to be using wood screws today. 2-inch wood screws should take care of most materials if they're inside of 1-inch thickness, because you've got a 3/4 plywood and that'll take it all the way through with just a little coming out of the bottom. Again, you can put a backing plate on the back of your bench if you want to use something to stabilize it a little more. I've never had a problem at all with it moving on me once it's properly mounted. Okay? But what we want to do with the larger drill is we're going to use that to drill the recess so that we can drop the head down flush with the cutting board surface and it doesn't grab a hold of our kydex. You want to get that below the surface. The drill that I already have mounted up is well inside of the thread diameter of your actual screw. That's so you can drill your pilot holes and get your screw started in. Okay? So let's get busy and we'll put this thing on real quick. Okay guys, let's get ready to mount this baby up. The first thing we want to do is get our safety goggles on. All right, the first thing we need to consider with our board is where we want to place it on the workspace. As I told you, you don't want it all the way back against the back wall because you're going to push your bench at some point up against your shop wall and there's going to be no clearance behind it. My recommendation is 2 inches. You can get by with less if you want to tighten it up. But I found for my purposes about 2 inches of gap on the back side of your cutting board is about what you want to work with. Okay? In order to get that measurement, measure you off 2 inches on a tape measure, slide your board forward, and then just move it back to that 2-inch mark. Get it back there. Once you've got both sides even at 2 inches, you're good to go. Okay. The next thing we want to do, we're going to mount 4 screws. These will be wood screws, and they're going straight through the workbench top, straight through the material, and then straight through the workbench top. Now, my recommendation is that you make them nice and clean and professional. Okay? The width of this cutting board is 14 inches by 30 inches. Okay? So if we basically take 2 inches inside on both sides, what we're going to end up with is a mark at 2 inches. You can put that anywhere on your surface that you want. And a mark at 2 inches off the other end. Okay? Do the same thing on the back side. These can be pretty rough because you're going to triangulate here in just a second. And that'll take care of it. Okay? Now what we want to do is we want to try to match these alignments up with the next measurement that we're going to make. Okay? That's going to be 2 inches off of this side. So measure the depth of your board. We're at 14, so come in off of it 2 inches back. That would be at the 12-inch mark, and 2 inches forward, that'll be at the 2-inch mark. Okay? Same thing on the other side. 2-inch mark and the 12-inch mark. Okay. What that creates is basically the alignment points that we can make to put our screws inside there. All we have to do now is just triangulate. All right? So, let me go get something that we can put across there. Okay, guys, you see that I have my simple alignment points. I measured in 2 inches off of each side, both the front and the sides, on both ends, front and back, and that created the little dots that I need for triangulation. Now what I brought in is a straight edge. This happens to be a ruler, but consider it just to be a straight object. What you're going to do is you're going to cross it over the 2 points that you measured for the length of the board and just make you about a 2-inch line. Same thing on the other. Do the same thing on all of your points now. Take your end points. And right there creates the mounting positions that you want. What you'll want to do now, put my straight edge down, is you're going to want to take your pilot drill. Make sure it's tight and that it's turning the right direction. Starting out with one of the back holes, before you drill it again, double check your measurement on your back side. Make sure it's 2 inches off the back exactly. If you need to adjust it, do so. Make sure the other side's good. Take a check in the middle. Make sure everything looks good. Once you get that exactly 2 inches off the back on both sides, then Drill one hole. Nice and straight up and down, nice and easy. Okay, I've got a pilot hole drilled now. What I want to do is I basically want to mount my bench with just one screw. Make sure it's tight and turning correctly. Ease it. Okay, don't go all the way in. Just put it down. Next, we're going to drill the hole on the other points. I would take the top off that press, but I think I can get by without it for now. Always consider anything that you might bump in case you don't want to knock something off the floor. That's with any project that you do. I've got 4 holes now drilled and one of them is mounted. Okay? Now, what we want to do, just for caution, put the other down. Now, you can go ahead and drive those screws down. You can even flip it over where you don't have marks on it and drive the screws straight into your cutting board. My recommendation is that you reset the hole just a little bit. That's why I brought the larger drill. I went ahead and put 2 of them down temporarily, and that's to stabilize it while I drill the next ones. Make sure you're good and tight. This one you just want to ease down just a little. Don't go down in too deep. Take it down about a quarter to an eighth of an inch. You want just enough to clear that little screw head. Now, go ahead and take your screw gun and run this one in. Under the surface. Not too much. We don't want to pull it back through the back side of your bench. Make sure that it's got plenty of meat. Get it under the surface. Okay, now back your other screws out. You've got to love these electric hand drills. We're going to wallow out these holes here now. Go really nice and slow. This is soft material. All right, last hole. Straight up and down. Yep, that's about right. All right. Get ready to run those last screws in. Make sure you're on there good and tight. Get that cleaned up a little for you to look at. And there you go, boys. We got us a nice cutting board surface on it. Now, if I were going to be worried about it, if I hadn't used this so many times, I would have flipped that over and gotten rid of those little marks that I put on there. If you plan your marking better, you can make smaller X's on your board, but that's a simple way to triangulate mounting holes, and they're all exactly in the same place on the board. Okay? With this material, you can basically take something like Windex or whatever and wipe those off. But in my case, I've made so many of them, they don't bother me when I'm working. All right? Now, what we want to show you is, let me get some Kydex and some leather. Okay, guys, I went and got some material to show you how nice it is to work with it. But we cut a lot of leather here. It's sold in 1x1s and 1x2s. You notice I got plenty of room on my cutting surface that I can work with my leather now. I also have a piece of Kydex, 1x2, and you can see that that fits well within the margins of your cutting board surface. Let me lay this off to the side. Now, as I said, if you use a standard square, you now have a backstop that you can easily slide it back and forth on your material before you score it. Obviously, I'm going to be working from that side of the bench. Okay, I'll be pulling it toward myself this way. But it makes it very nice and easy to score and easy to hold down. I've even seen guys use two-sided tape and just put a couple little pieces on both sides so that their materials will hold down nice. The tape will stay down when you pull your material up, and it'll stop it from sliding very well. Okay? It also doesn't leave any residue on the back side of the material, both leather and Kydex. Use it all the time. But at the end of the day, this is how you would normally make your scoring marks. A lot of folks will take and they'll make incremental lines on their cutting board surface so that it's real easy to get to the 1 and the 12 and the 6 and the whatever number you need to get to cut the piece off to the length that you need. Okay? But we're basically set up. This gives us plenty of clearance in the back. Imagine me being the wall. Behind it, you can easily lay your materials behind your board now, and you still got enough room to get back and forth, you know, if you kick them off the surface and still work with stuff. I found that anytime you're handling and juggling a lot of materials, you need some place to stick them real quick. Well, this gives you a nice little place to work with, right up against the back wall of your work area. Okay? Anyway, thanks for joining, and consider getting some of this cutting board material because it will definitely save the surface of your workbench like it did mine. Thanks a lot. See you next time.